We're here today with Mitch Savoie, continuing the Associa Gulf Coast Educational Series, where our entire goal here is to ensure that you, the board member, or you, the manager, are given more information to make your life a little bit easier. Whether we're talking about technical specifics or whether we're talking about just how to be a better manager, Mitch here actually has a different take on what we're talking about for the educational series. So let me bring Mitch in. So Mitch, welcome to the program. Mitch is the owner of Savhill Consulting, and ironically enough, full disclosure, Mitch used to work with Associa Gulf Coast, and God love her for that. But she got to see how Associa Gulf Coast works, the inner workings of it, and then over the course of several years, she kind of broke off and started her own company. So Mitch, if I could, welcome to the program. Can you give us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely, and thank you so much for having me here, Paul. It is a pleasure to share some tips and tricks and knowledge with the old Associa, my alma mater team. And
yes.
I am a licensed community association manager. So I have been through the ranks, as we say, in the management world and in the community association world. I'm also a certified professional coach, which means that I help leaders to succeed, whether it be in sales or in strategizing or in handling different personalities when they're managing people, which is what we're doing in an association. Whether you're a board member or you are the manager, you're definitely handling people every day, all day, right?
All the time. And actually, you bring up a really good point regarding people. And from a coaching perspective, from a management perspective, it's all about people. We can teach somebody the nuts and bolts about how to read a balance sheet or how to look at a proposal for a roofing contract or a roofing project, if you will. But ultimately, it's about the people. And that relationship that we've created with the people, whether it's the board, whether it's the manager, whether it's the vendor, it can be extremely valuable, but also very delicate. So one of the things that we find in the association management world, and this is both for a portfolio manager and also for an on-site manager to a certain extent, is a feeling of being overwhelmed, maybe a little bit more stress than they would anticipate, because quite frankly, there's just a lot of things to do. There's a lot of stuff that needs to go on. So in this conversation, I'd like to touch a little bit on some time management pieces, ways you might be able to help our team and also our board members, but also from the stress perspective, how to kind of alleviate those types of things. So I'd like to start on the time management side, if you could. So Mitch, being a manager previously in your previous life, if you will, you dealt with a lot of the crazy, if you will, and how you can deal with those tasks and how they build up. There's always that feeling of being overwhelmed. And from a time management perspective, can you kind of walk us through some maybe best tips or best practices and something that a manager or even a board member might be able to take away from this discussion, how to make their day better?
Absolutely. Yes, you said a really important point, and that is stress is one of the biggest struggles right now, especially right now in times of uncertainty, of a pandemic, of some of the homeowners maybe being displeased, to put it lightly, right? When's the pool closed? And I do have an extensive background in hospitality management as well. So dealing with very high-paced, high stress environments. At one point, I was a director of food and beverage outlets for a 5-star hotel in Beverly Hills. If you can imagine the demands and the amount of things that you have to juggle in a given day. So when I switched into community association management, I thought, well, this should be a little bit easier than the hotel world. Boy, was I in for a rude awakening. It's different. It's different, but all very challenging. So I am a avid reader, and I'm going to recommend a couple of books here for managers and board members, and really anyone who wants to have some balance in their life. I'm an avid reader. I am always finding out, watching TED Talks, listening to anything and everything that people have come up with, because I believe in not reinventing the wheel, but just following in what I see work. So some of the things that I have seen that work, and they work with my coaching clients and have worked in my life. The first thing is to realize that there's no truth to the term work-life balance. Work-life balance, it's a myth. Or the way people look at balance as a 50-50 proposition, or let's say 30-30-30, because most people have work, family, and then they have their volunteer work, whether it be volunteering for an organization like CAI or for their local church or the PTA. So balance is more about, if you can envision, one of those old school scales where you put the gold on one side and you put something heavier on the other side, and the scales tip, and then you add things and take away things on each side so that eventually they don't tip all the way over.
Sure.
If you imagine your life being kind of a 3 or 4-way scale like that, the trick to balance is to make sure that you're putting enough things in each of those, let's say, plates, that none of the plates tip all the way over at one time. So it's okay if sometimes work is taking a little bit more of a priority because you have some projects or you have budget season, right? It's budget season coming up.
Sure.
It's okay if family pulls you a little bit more sometimes. Somebody's sick, maybe your kids need extra help, and it pulls a little bit more in that direction. The tricky thing is to make sure that you're not being tipped in only one side all the time, because then that's when the balance is off, right? And that's when we get stress, and we get that compounded with feeling guilty because you're not giving enough of yourself in other areas, and then you start to feel overwhelmed. And right now, too much overwhelm is making people a little bit volatile, right? Have you experienced
that? Mitch, you're absolutely right. For those of us who might not know the date or when we're actually recording this is the middle of September in 2020. We are in the heat of the coronavirus, the COVID-19 pandemic. So what Mitch is relating to is this bizarre world that we're living in, where most of us are either working from home or very limited access to human contact. So I just wanted to put that in a bit of context for you, Mitch. Even though, don't get me wrong, even without the coronavirus, we still live in a bizarre world in the association management field.
That's correct. That's correct. So even when we get through this, things will always be challenging. So here's some tips, some things that I like to discuss. And this is part of a much larger and more intensive time management class and training that I do. But I can tell you some tips and tricks. The first thing is, as I said, get the idea out of your head that there's a 50-50 life-work balance proposition, right? So when you can accept that concept and you can accept the idea of like, okay, sometimes work is going to pull me over here a little bit more as long as I pull it back. So how do you pull it back to reduce stress and to keep yourself organized? Well, first is to find things that will release that tension that builds up during the day, whether for some people it's running, for some people it's painting, for some people it's playing with their dog, for some people it's yoga, whatever it is, it's an activity, gardening, whatever helps you release stress and is a different activity than the activity that you're doing for 8, 9, 10 hours a day, something that's totally different. So if you're doing a lot of brainy work, maybe do a little bit more physical work. If you found that you've been doing a lot of physical work all day, maybe you come home and you just relax and do something like taking a hot bath. So balancing the types of activities that you're doing during the day will help in dispersing the energy. And then proper organization, really planning ahead. You can't build a structure without real good plans, right? Drawings. So planning your days and your weeks as far ahead as you can. I like to have my clients take a look at their week, maybe on Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening before they jump into Monday, because Monday morning is here and that's it. You're in the moving train. So if on Sunday you take a little time, or maybe Friday afternoon when you're wrapping up your week, to look at the week ahead and actually plan out your activities and the type of activities and what you're going to accomplish. If you can't make it happen on paper, you're definitely not going to make it happen in life. So planning it, putting it in a calendar, color coding your calendar, if that works for you, if you're more of a visual person, but really having tactics and plans ahead. Now, what happens when you're a manager? And you try to plan as best you can the day, but somebody knocks on your door and they say, do you have a minute? Right? Have you heard that before?
Right, sure. Yeah, never. That would never happen in any of our associations.
Now, of course,
or the ever popular knock on the door. This will just take a minute. All it takes.
Yep. So, of course, as managers and even board members, you want to be approachable and you want to be able to help with whatever situation is coming up. But you have to put boundaries there. So how do you do that in a nice way? Some say, well, I don't want to seem unapproachable and I want people to be able to come and knock on my door whenever they want. I said, okay, well, are you accomplishing anything during the week then? Because it's pretty hard to do that. Every time that you get distracted, it takes your brain anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes to refocus on what you were looking at. So what about instead saying, Paul, is this really going to take 5 minutes? Because I do want to give you all the time that you need. But I'm in the middle of something right now. So do you need 5 minutes or do you need more like 15 or 20 minutes? In which case we can schedule maybe an appointment to get back together later on today. How does that sound? Right? So the person may say, oh, it's really not that urgent. And you might have already handled it right there. You know what? Never mind. It wasn't that urgent. Or they may say, no, it will just take 5 minutes. Okay. Then have the conversation. Or they may say, actually, yeah, you're right. It might take a little bit longer than 5 minutes. And then you can say, well, how's 2 o'clock for you? Why don't you come back at 2 o'clock and we'll sit down and talk? What that does is that it puts the control in your hands of your schedule. And you can say, I'm trying to finish this budget here. So if you give me an hour, I can circle back to you. So whatever form you want to use that, it's about controlling your time. Same with emails. If you're working on a project, putting an out of office email that says, I will be working on a project for the next X amount of time, 2 hours, 3 hours, and we'll be checking emails again at 1 p.m. If this is very urgent, the keyword being very, because everybody thinks their matter is urgent, right?
Everybody's an emergency is everybody else's emergency. No doubt about it.
If this is very urgent, call my phone, leave a message, right? So just ways to say, I'm going to help you. Your communication has been received. However, right in this moment, I'm going to finish what I'm doing, and then I'm going to circle back to you. Because that's how you actually get things done. If you let people just walk in your office all day long, every day, and the day ends and you go, oh my God, I still haven't finished this budget sheet that I've been staring at since 8 o'clock in the morning. Well, yeah, honey, you haven't put boundaries in on your day.
Right.
So it's balancing the boundaries, the communications, and the hundreds of emails that I know we get in our inboxes every day. Just organizing a time when these are the times that I check emails. So working in some way that way, of course, when we're working in an active, fast-paced environment, when things are always changing, that doesn't always work. But it's better to at least have some sort of a plan rather than no plan. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And to that point, using your example of you've been staring at a budget for 8 hours and haven't gotten anything done, that leads to the manager or even the treasurer of the association working till 10, 11, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning on that budget because they let their day get away from them or let other people direct their day, if you will, earlier. So they've kind of created that own monster by not controlling that day. Is that a fair way to kind of encapsulate what you just said?
Oh my God, that's a beautiful way. Absolutely. And I love the monster that, just their day just got away from them and it's not productive. So it's actually not productive to operate that way. And sometimes you just have to tell somebody, listen, I'm in the middle of a project and this is really important for you. So if you just let me finish the project, give me about an hour, I can circle back to you. If we throw more communication at the problem, most of the times it will resolve. Most of the times, because yes, there is 10% crazy. You are going to deal with people that are crazy and unreasonable, right? There is that out there in the world as well. So it's not 100%, but even if 90% of the time, even if 80% of the time you can apply this, you're going to see your productivity shoot through the roof. Much better than if you just let everybody pretty much hijack your agenda. Which brings me to the next point. If you're going to have a meeting, have an agenda. Have a very strict agenda. And I'm talking about even that 15-minute meeting. So, Paul, you wanted to meet with me. These are your concerns. And this is what I understand that you'd like to take up in this meeting. And we said 15 minutes, right? Paul, is that still okay? 15 minutes is going to be good for you? Okay, sure. Great. So you see what I just did?
You put a limit on me. Yeah.
We've got 15 minutes. This is the agenda. Once that 15 minutes is up, well, Paul, I see we're running out of time here. Do we need to schedule another meeting, or are we good?
Sure.
And that'll tell the person, oh, no, I'm good. So just little ways to put those boundaries and control the communication.
Well, I think to your point, being able to control that narrative really allows the manager to not only control the conversation, but also allows that whole situation to not become, for lack of a better phrase, too social, because there's always people who, and I fall into this trap too personally, where I'll start going in on a different tangent that has nothing to do with the reason I'm actually sitting in front of you talking. The next thing you know, we're talking about football, and it has nothing to do with what we're talking about. So using that agenda concept where I can control the narrative better, that's allowing us to stay on that task. And then when the 15 minutes in this example is up, and then we want to talk football, well, that's fine. But the issue has been resolved, or at least addressed.
That's right. And that's very self-aware of you to pick up on the fact that you do that.
Yeah. Hey, we are both talkers. Let's just call it for what it is. We could talk about just about anything.
And that's important. I think what many management companies understand is the value of a manager who can be hospitable, who can ingratiate himself or herself with the clients, because that goes a long way, especially when somebody's upset or angry. When you have built up a really good rapport and that person is upset, it's a lot easier to handle them than when you're very short with the people around you. So the socializing time, it's important, but again, you have to set boundaries. You have to control that time. You have to know that if you took 15 more minutes, then you're going to have to shave off that 15 more minutes off of another project or something else.
Sure.
Make up the time. So, that's a little bit. And some of those tips I learned from a book from Tim Ferriss called The 4-Hour Workweek, which I think is phenomenal. And he talks a lot about how to handle communications. And then the other book that was really amazing for me was called The One Thing. Gary Keller, from a little known company called Keller Williams. The One Thing is a quick, small, easy read. And it's all about focusing your attention on the one thing, the next most important thing, rather than being scattered. So that's another book I'm going to recommend. And then one major time management tip that I give a lot of my clients is eat the frog. So the morning starts and you go, okay, what are my priorities? What am I going to start with? Eat the frog. And that means if you have a frog to eat in the day, that difficult conversation, the person that you don't want to confront, or for some people it's spreadsheets. I hate spreadsheets. I'm a people person. So the administrative, that's my frog, right? That's going to be my frog. I'd rather take
you and me both.
So eat the frog. Do the hardest thing first so that you get it out of the way. And then you're not dreading it or putting it off for the rest of the day. Do the hardest thing first, and then the rest of the day seems like a breeze. Have the hardest conversation first, and then the rest of the day is going to be lighter. Now, some people might think, well, Mitch, that sounds great, except that if I have that difficult conversation in the morning, it's going to set the tone for the rest of my day. I'm going to have a bad day. So to that, I say, you control your emotions and your day. Mm-hmm. Get the difficult conversation out of the way. And then if you have to go take a walk, if you have to go have an ice cream cone, if you have to take a trip to Starbucks and have your caramel latte with extra caramel, whatever is going to put you back in a good mood, you control that. But at least that difficult conversation, the frog has been eaten. It's out of your way.
Mitch, let me ask you a question regarding the difficult conversation. And I truly believe that nobody enjoys the bad conversation. Nobody's looking forward to it. And it is, to your example of frog, that you got to kind of deal with and get on, because it can drag your entire day down. You can build up stress if you're going to have that conversation at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, you might be thinking about it for half the day, and then half of your day is shot. Right. But what I find, and agree or disagree with me, and it's totally okay with what I'm about to say, but what I found when you're dealing with a challenging conversation is it's not necessarily the message that people will get, I'm going to say, mad at or defensive about, but it's the delivery of the message. It's how I'm going to tell you no, which can truly offend people. There are certain people who are very black and white, X, Y, Z, end of discussion, this is how it is. Then there are others who will soft sell and kind of work their way around a bad topic, and some people react differently. So could you speak to a little bit about the delivery versus the message and how people tend to react when we're dealing with stress?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's the crux of good management, is to be able to deliver the bad news in a way that can be digested. Well, how do you do that? First of all, I do a lot of trainings on different behavioral styles. So like the DISC behavioral styles, because different people communicate differently. And for me, I use DISC a lot because it's one of the main profiling formats that most of the big corporations use, because it's very simple. It's 4 different behavioral styles. Once you understand them, you can really speak to them. But the important thing is to understand who you're speaking to. Is it somebody that's more fast-paced and aggressive? Is it somebody that takes a long time to process and they're going to need more information? Is it somebody that is not as in your face, so they may be nodding and saying they're okay with what you're saying, but that you're not really getting the full,
they're not getting it,
right? So this is a bigger subject. All that to say, this is a very bigger subject, and I can do a 2-hour corporate training just on this. But one tip I will give, and this came from being in Beverly Hills, directing restaurants, having people who were very entitled come in and say, I want this or I want that, and having to say, I'm afraid I can't do that for you. Like I can't make a table appear where there's no table for you. And, whatever it is that you're delivering that is going to be a difficult matter, it's all in the way. First of all, you deliver it in as positive a tone as you can. Second of all, you deliver it in a way where you're pushing the vision. And what I mean by that is, if you're saying, well, we can't do that, but this is why. Or, yeah, we can't do that, but this is what we can do. Or, the reason we're not doing that is because we're doing this, which is part of this bigger vision. So, no, we're not doing that paint project right now because our roofs are falling down and we're going to fix the roofs. And guess what? You're not going to have any more leaks. Isn't that exciting? So I'm always the you're welcome. I'm giving you bad news and you're welcome. Right?
Exactly.
Push the vision. This is why we can't do that right now. Now, I don't agree 100% that not everybody likes a difficult conversation. Well, there are some combative people. There are some people
Yes, there are.
There's people looking for fights. And you're not going to control those people, and you're not going to make those people happy. So the smart thing to do is to Be able to understand what's in front of you. Is that a person that's just looking for a fight and you're not going to get anywhere anyway? And you can just say, sir, we're going to have to agree to disagree on this, and not let them disrespect you. That's a boundary thing again. Or is it somebody that just needs a little bit more data? Listen, this is why. Let me explain to you. I'm going to take some time and I'm going to explain this to you. This is the greater vision. This is why we're not doing it that way. This is why we're doing it this way. And this is what's so great about it. And we think it's going to work. And then that person can walk away going, okay. Or at least let me go back and think about that, right? So push the vision. Always push the vision. And if you have to, get some group support on it too. Say, right, everybody, if you're at a board meeting and you're like, right, everybody, right, do we all agree? Nod positive statements of yes, we're nodding, we agree, so that they feel the group pressure and go, okay, well, maybe those guys know something that I don't. So maybe I'll just shut up and watch how this plays out. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. And Mitch, I got to tell you that you've thrown an awful lot of information at us today. I mean, just the 3 bullet points that jump to my head. There is no true meaning of the work-life balance. The 50-50 doesn't exist, and I would totally agree with you. I think a lot of people try and get there, but ultimately, you can't achieve it. We just get pulled in too many different directions. So we need to embrace that and see how we can move forward. Having the agenda, and I'm every bit as a culprit of this one as well. You get off track when you don't have an agenda. And then you get into 5 different things, using my example of talking about football. That wasn't on the agenda, but darn it, we started talking about football. Right. And then certainly that eat the frog reference of dealing with the challenge first, or as early in the day as you possibly can, will make the rest of your day exponentially easier. So Mitch, I'm gonna bring you back onto the show here in the near future, because we can go on 45 different tangents here, and we didn't have an agenda for this call. Totally did it by design. But that being said, for those of us who are in the industry, and even those of us who aren't, consulting is a huge assistant in the world that we live in today. Everybody needs help in some capacity, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional, whether it's mental. The technicalities of your job. People need to understand how to do their jobs better, but there's so many different variables to it. And what you do, you're an inspiration for what we're all trying to do, meaning how do we make our own lives better on a day-to-day basis? So that being said, those people who might not be looking at the screen right now, they might only be listening to this on a podcast. What's the most convenient or effortless way for a manager, a board member, or quite frankly, anybody to get in touch with you directly to talk more in depth about the challenges they might be having?
Great question. And yes, you're right. Whether it's one-on-one coaching as a leader or as a manager, or whether it's having me come in to do a corporate training where we really dig deep on some of these behavioral styles and we do some role play, which is always very fun. This is what I do. So you can go directly to my website, which has many different ways to contact me, and that's savhillconsulting.com. And my email is info@savhillconsulting.com. And that's really going to be the easiest way, because I have a scheduling link for right there. You can even schedule a 15-minute chat with me, or in the website, you can see all of the services that I provide.
I love it. Well, Mitch, really, I truly appreciate your time today. We're going to bring you back onto the show, and we're going to kind of dig through a couple of other of these topics, certainly in the near future, but much continued success, not only for you and your company, but for you in general. Thank you so much for your time, Mitch. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been an honor. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. My pleasure.